Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today. My name is James Otteson. I am the John T. Ryan Jr. Professor of Business Ethics in the Mendoza College of Business, and I am privileged to serve as the Faculty Director for the Notre Dame Deloitte Center for Ethical Leadership. On behalf of the Center, welcome to all of you. One of the Center's activities is sponsoring lectures featuring distinguished speakers. Today we are hosting the Cahill Lecture featuring not one, not two, but three distinguished speakers. And I would like to thank Father Ollie Williams, Professor John Sikorsky, and also Crystal Bozer for all their work in organizing today's event. A brief word before we begin about Frank Cahill, after whom this lecture series is named. Frank Cahill was a respected businessman who enjoyed sharing his time, values, and business expertise with others. He hailed from Columbia Township, Ohio, and was an executive vice president with Roadway Express Incorporated. He worked at Roadway Express for 31 years, retiring in 1996. Thereafter, he lectured on business ethics at Xavier University and was an active member of St. Anthony Catholic Church in Madisonville, Ohio. He passed away in 1998. His family and friends created the Cahill Lecture Series at Notre Dame to honor him and his work and his passion for finding a moral purpose in business. It is our honor and privilege to host this latest installment of the Cahill Lecture Series in his memory. Introducing our three distinguished speakers today is Monet Licata. Monet is from Palisade, Colorado. She is a sophomore majoring in marketing and global affairs. She is currently in Professor Sikorsky's Theology and the Noble Vocation of Business course. And she's a Deloitte Scholar in the Deloitte International Business Scholars Colloquium. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll now call Monet to the podium. Monet?
Thank you so much, Professor Otteson, for the really warm introduction. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Terrence Keeley, who will be discussing the wisdom of shareholder welfare with respondents Senator Phil Gramm and Father Oliver Williams, who will be providing their own insight on the topic. Terrence Keeley earned a BA degree in politics and philosophy from the University of Notre Dame and completed his graduate studies in history and economics at Oxford University Christ Church. Currently, he serves as the CEO and CIO of 1.6 LLC, an advisory firm he founded to help institutional and high net worth investors optimize the amount of impact in their investment portfolios. He is also an author of a new acclaimed book on stakeholder capitalism and ESG investing called Sustainable, Moving Beyond ESG to Impact, which is available for students at this lecture. Additionally, Mr. Keeley has published several new articles this past month in the Wall Street Journal and Fortune magazine, including Why ESG Funds Fail and How Could They Succeed, as well as was Milton Friedman the first woke capitalist? Until July 2022, Terry was a senior advisor at BlackRock responsible for overseeing the relationships and services that BlackRock provides to official institutions and ran the BlackRock Relationship Academy, which is BlackRock's learning initiatives for clients and those who serve them. While at BlackRock, Mr. Keeley authored or co-authored more than 12 papers on optimal asset allocation. Prior to his private sector career, Mr. Keeley worked for Congressman David Stockholm and for President Ronald Reagan's Council for Economic Advisors. As an adjunct to his work at Sovereign Trends, Mr. Keeley has been a lecturer in business and ethics at a number of universities, as well as Bloomberg TV contributing editor. Mr. Keeley serves on advisory boards for the Asian Development Bank, the University of Notre Dame, and Oxford University Christ Church. In 2012, Terry was appointed by Pope Francis to serve on the Vatican's Bank Advisory Board, reviewing the banking and financial operations of the Holy See. Mr. Keeley is married to Ceciska Bori of Geneva, Switzerland, and they have 2 grown sons. Additionally, I'll be introducing Senator Phil Gramm. An economist by training, Senator Phil Gramm has had a long and distinguished career in public service, academia, and the private sector. In 2002 through 2011, Senator Graham was the vice chairman of UBS Investment Bank, where he provided strategic, economic, political, and policy advice to important corporate and institutional clients. He served in the U.S. Congress representing Texas for more than 2 decades, first as the 6th Congressional District Representative to the U.S. House of Representatives, then later as senator. His legislative record includes landmark bills like the Graham-Latta budget, which reduced federal spending, rebuilt national defense, and mandated Reagan tax cut, and the Graham-Rudman Act, which placed the first binding constraints on federal spending. As chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, Senator Graham steered legislation modernizing banking, insurance, and security laws. The Graham-Leach-Bliley Act amended the 70-year-old Glass-Steagall Act, allowing banks, security companies, and insurance companies to affiliate through the Financial Services Holding Company. Senator Graham, who holds a PhD in economics from the University of Georgia, taught economics at Texas A&M University for 12 years before becoming a member of Congress. He has published numerous articles and books on subjects ranging from private property, monetary theory and policy, to the economics of mineral extraction, and most recently, a book entitled The Myth of American Inequality: How Government Biases Policy Debate. Senator Graham and his wife, Wendy, celebrated their 52nd wedding anniversary yesterday and have 2 grown grandchildren, 5 grandchildren, including a granddaughter currently studying at the University of Notre Dame's Mendoza College of Business. And lastly, I'll be introducing Father Oliver Williams. Father Oliver Williams is a Holy Cross priest and member of the Management and Organization faculty of the Mendoza College of Business at the University of Notre Dame, where he's also the director of the Center for Ethics and Religious Values in Business. In addition to his scholarly work, Father Williams also spent a year of postdoctoral work at Stanford Graduate School of Business. Additionally, Williams is the editor or author of 20 books, as well as numerous articles on business ethics in journals such as Harvard Business Review, Business Ethics Quarterly, and Journal of Corporate Citizenship, just to name a few. Some of his recent books include Corporate Social Responsibility, The Role of Business in Sustainable Development, and Sustainable Development, View and Millennium Developmental Goals. Father Williams served as assistant provost in the University of Notre Dame for 7 years under Father Theodore Hesburgh, and in 2006, he was appointed a member of the 4-person board of directors in the UN Global Compact, which oversees the world's largest voluntary corporate citizenship initiative, with over 10,000 businesses in 160 countries as members. In addition to his appointments at Notre Dame, Father Williams has served as a visiting professor at the Graduate School of Business at the University of Cape Town. He has also been named as Professor Extraordinary at the University of Stellenbosch in South Africa, and in 2019 was awarded the Summer Marcus Award for the Social Issues in Management Division of the Academy of Management for outstanding contributions of service and scholarship to the field. So, without further ado, clearly we are joined by 3 very accomplished individuals, which will make for a wonderful conversation on the wisdom of shareholder welfare. So, please join me in welcoming Terrence Keeley, Senator Phil Gramm, and Father Oliver Williams.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Monet. Very, very gracious introductory remarks. It is such a privilege for me to be back home at Notre Dame, but most importantly to share a stage with 2 dear friends. I'm sorry, we're going to have to do a round of applause for 52 years yesterday. So Monet was an exhaustive introduction, but one thing you left out was that Senator Phil Gramm started as a Democrat and became a Republican, proving that there is hope for everyone in this world. I have so many dear friends in the audience. Many of you are not business oriented, so I will be adjusting some of my remarks to make sure that the crowd is not completely bored. And I think what's more important is that we get to Q&A. I know we all have a few remarks to share, and hopefully I do so efficiently. The motto of Mendoza is to grow the good in business, and an important part of the book that I've written, which I could not write in actual fact, addresses many of these related questions. Importantly, What I wanted to find out in the study that I wrote is what should be the role of business and finance in resolving really the great social and environmental challenges of our time. What should business be doing about climate change? What should business be doing about income inequality? I think, as many of you know, the ESG market for environmental, social, and governance market purports to be a solution for those. And in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which Monet mentioned, as well as the book, I exhaustively show, I hope, that the ESG market is, broadly speaking, misallocated. This gives you a sense, and I'm not going to talk about ESG today, but gives you a sense of how misallocated it is. This little red dot shows you where currently all ESG funds are versus unknowable impact, when in actual fact, the market of impact opportunity is defined by this little green dot over here. Suffice it to say that one thing that has happened to me in the 2 years since I really took this project on is I've become increasingly convinced, in fact certain, that there are investments that do well and do good. That is to say, generate either equal or excess market returns while verifiably resulting in some type of outcome, be it lower carbon or some type of desirable social outcome. That is certainly possible in finance. It's not possible the way it's currently being run. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. What I wanted to talk today about instead was much more Mendoza's model to grow the good in business, both in practice and theory. Like many of you here at Mendoza, and I suspect Dean Kramer's many of the faculty members, this is really a struggle. It's not evident how much good business can do or should be doing, should be trying to do. And to just illustrate that, I thought we should talk about a couple of different extremes. Corporations that have, for example, set out to do great good and failed, and others that have perhaps set out with very, very, very ambitious, let's say, commercial objectives and succeeded wildly. 2 examples. The first is Emmanuel Faber of Dannon yogurt. You probably have all had a Dannon yogurt. That's Activa. I see Oikos, O-I-K-O-S, is fairly common on the campus. You probably all had Avian water. So Emmanuel Faber became the CEO after many years at Dannon and elected to turn Dannon into what was in effect the French equivalent of a B corporation. And in the United States, it did become a B corporation, a publicly listed B corporation. He oversaw extraordinary efforts to try and transform the food production away from dairy products to plant-based, just because of what that would do for carbon reductions. He actually introduced the idea of carbon-based accounting. He was the darling, without doubt, for the sustainability business effort for many, many, many people. The problem is he also oversaw 5 restructuring plans, thousands of job cuts, and was eventually ousted. His stock declined 3% while he was CEO from 2016 to 2021, while his competitors, Unilever, Nestle, actually both went up more than 45%. So as I said, this would not be a stock that we would want you, Mike Donovan, to be investing in, so please keep that out of the Notre Dame portfolio if you don't mind. But that might miss the point. It's not that, in fact, he did a bad job. He just did a bad job for shareholders. What's an example of a company that has done brilliantly well for all of its stakeholders? That is to say, for its employees, for its suppliers, for the communities in which it operated with, and obviously for the shareholders. Well, that person actually is Henry Ford. And just today I came across this 2014 headline in the Detroit Journal. This is 1914. And it describes a number of the efforts that Henry Ford's brilliant vision of fundamentally transforming how human beings transported themselves, which, as you know, prior to the assembly line, all transportation took place by horse, by hoof, by foot, by bicycle. Henry Ford had an obsession, an absolute obsession, to fundamentally transform how people actually transported themselves, but making that gift be available to as many people as possible, hence the assembly line. What he ended up doing, which was so extraordinary, is he kept on cutting the price of his car. So a Model T actually cost $25,000 in 1908. By 1916, it had dropped to $9,000 in today's money. He absolutely vowed that his workers would be able to buy their own products within 3 months. They would only need 3 months' wages to be able to purchase the products. And he kept on cutting costs to make that possible. He also did this. Now, this announcement about giving $10 million in 1914 profits to his employees, it's actually somewhat different than that. In one day, he doubled salaries. They went from $2.50 to $5 a day. Just imagine that day if you were on the job, the workers, and the number of workers that came flocking to Detroit to try and get one of these very, very coveted jobs in a Ford plant. Of course, when Henry Ford died in 1947, he was also worth the equivalent of $200 billion, which plus or minus is what Elon Musk is worth, depending on how you want to mark-to-market Twitter, which is clearly somewhat lower than what he paid for it. The principal point I wanted to make with this long introduction, really, is that it's not actually possible when capitalism, shareholder capitalism, is really managed with all of its brilliant capabilities to distinguish it from stakeholder capitalism, the broad model in which one cares for not just one's shareholders, but one's broader community. And this was the segue that I wanted to make into the principal topic, which is the wisdom of shareholder welfare. We need to have an operating understanding or principle by which corporations are going to manage themselves. I think it's a great idea. We can turn that off. Thank you very much. In my recent Fortune magazine article, which was provocative intentionally, was Milton Friedman the first woke capitalist? I discuss how shareholders have repeatedly intervened of necessity since 1970, which is when Milton Friedman wrote his very, very famous article on what is the purpose of business. As you all, I think, know, that article has since been translated into saying the purpose of business is to make profits, period, end of report, leave it alone, make profits, that's all they're supposed to do. Well, in actual fact, I don't believe that's a fair reading of Milton Friedman's 1970 article. The quote that I use from the 1970 article is this: in a free enterprise, private property system, a corporate executive is in fact the employee of the owners of that business. He or she, I add, has a direct responsibility to conduct the business in accordance with their desires, which generally will be to make as much money as possible, while conforming to the basic rules of society, both those embodied in law and those embodied in ethical custom. So what has happened since 1970? I'm going to give you a 5-minute history of corporate governance. What has actually happened since 1970 when shareholders have repeatedly intervened, oftentimes not at the, let's say, pleasure of their CEOs? What have they done? And broadly speaking, has that made for better outcomes? Well, you may be aware the largest bankruptcy in history, in American history, was Penn Central, which was in 1970. It was later followed, decades later, by Enron. But it's a large part of the result of that failure, as well as repeated corporate bribery scandals. Shareholders and the SEC insisted upon independent audit committees. There were no independent audit committees in the United States of America until the late 70s. In fact, there was no word corporate governance in the Federal Register until 1976, Phil. 1976 was the first time the phrase corporate governance appears in the Federal Register. In 1980s and 1990s, there were a bunch of, for those of you who weren't around, I was, a bunch of asset stripping takeovers by Victor Posner's. So a number of shareholders convened, they were led by CalPERS, to introduce executive pay guidelines and poison pill takeovers. You cannot buy this company and strip it of its assets anymore without actually paying a big price up front. In 1991 and 1993, shareholders fired the CEOs of IBM, Kodak, Westinghouse, General Motors, and American Express. Shareholders. CEOs, you are no longer employed, out the door. Just the same thing that happened to Emanuel Faber of Danone. And after the great financial crisis, I think everyone remembers, a number of shareholder resolutions were introduced to increase compensation packages that had to vest over multiple years to better align through compensation clawbacks the interests of shareholders and how people were being compensated. But in recent years, there have been an increasing number of environmental and social shareholder resolutions. Two quickly come to mind. In 2019, DuPont shareholders voted with an 81% record to require DuPont, which is the largest maker of plastic in the world, to examine where all of its plastic was ending up after use. As you all know, a lot of it ends up in the ocean, and a lot of it ends up killing. So, in fact, that many shareholders, this was not in DuPont's direct interest, but DuPont now has to actually study how its plastic pellets, by the way, 10 trillion a year, how they are actually filling landfills and ending up in the seas. Similarly, shareholders at Wendy's voted with a 95% margin to require Wendy's to join the Fair Food Program. It turns out that Fair Food Program, Wendy's was the only fast food distributor that did not join the Fair Food Program during COVID. Luigi Zingales of the University of Chicago and Oliver Hart of Harvard refer to these more recent votes on environmental and social issues as a new form of corporate governance. Rather than shareholder value, they believe that shareholders are insisting increasingly on shareholder welfare maximization. I believe that this is where the discussion of stewardship now lies. It's heading, I think, intensively towards these conversations because of those ethical customs that we spoke about earlier. How long this will be the case, we don't know. Obviously, in every example that I gave you, shareholders were insisting that corporate owners do something that they kind of didn't want to do because it involved short-term costs for long-term benefits. Short-term costs for long-term benefits. That was the unifying element of every single one of those shareholder interventions. And I think that this is the discussion, and the discussion that needs to be had. What, in fact, is in the interests, the long-term interests of shareholders? And I think that's the debate that we're participating in. Obviously, there are some who decry this debate. One of them is Vivek Ramaswamy, who has taken over the pages of the Wall Street Journal on how ESG is criminal and it should only, all things. Vivek Ramaswamy and I are having a debate at Columbia University, Ali, in the new year. You're all welcome to attend. Short-term sacrifice for long-term gains. It turns out many of these same themes, by the way, are very good for your wallet. Sustainability themes, a lot of work that's been done by George Serafim at Harvard shows that more sustainable companies, in fact, do add value and do trade at a higher premium than those that are not. Circular economy themes, it's self-evidently the case that when you cut your carbon footprint by eliminating waste, that can flow through to the bottom line. In March 2014, in the Journal of Corporate Citizenship, a very respected voice in corporate ethics, and also a priest with the Holy Cross Order, published an article on corporate social responsibility, asking whether it could change the world, and expressing hope that corporate social responsibility would become an emerging discipline for every corporation. That author, of course, is on the stage, Father Ollie Williams. He concluded that article with these sentences: sustainable development and its business contribution, corporate social responsibility, is a challenge, but it's also a promise. If we want a better world, we cannot do without it. Corporate social responsibility can change the world. Whether or not it does depends upon us. Well, in my few remaining minutes, Ali, I'd like to talk a little bit more about who us is, specifically referring to the Notre Dame community, and specifically referring it to the challenge that is most often mentioned, which is achieving net zero by 2050, the stated goals of the Paris Accord. I think you all know that achieving net zero is absolutely the most audacious socioeconomic undertaking humanity has ever conceived. And I actually don't think we fully appreciate how audacious it really is. A couple of data points are necessary to put this into context. The first two are easy, 51 billion and 0. 51 billion being the total amount of carbons in tons that humanity now releases into the air every year, and 0, where we are supposed to try to get to by 2050 to be in accord with Paris. Just think about this, though. If every single motor vehicle, in fact, every single mode of transport in the world, ships, planes, cars, trucks, trains, were to be converted to electric, and if every single source of that electricity was in fact renewable, that would remediate 7% of that total 51 billion. And then if you were to take every single building, residential and commercial, in the world, and heat it and cool it also with completely renewable sources, both of these are extraordinary ideas. Crazy. We're spending a lot of time trying to achieve these. If both of those extraordinary goals were achieved, that's another 8%. We'd have another 43 billion tons to go. Energy is embedded in literally everything we do and everything we consume. Here's a wonderful fact from Václav Smil, who all of you should be reading, Václav Smil, How the World Works. That should be assigned reading for everyone. The average greenhouse tomato that is consumed in the Northern Hemisphere in January has 7 tablespoons of diesel fuel in it. That's what it takes to grow it, to provide the fertilizer, to heat it, and to transport it to your table. 7 tablespoons of diesel. The simple fact of the matter is, not only to achieve Paris, do we need to change every vehicle, every building, all of our, so many other elements, but our food. Food will need to be relocalized, completely relocalized, and we're going to have to find a way to produce it by seasons. As Christians, I think we also have another really difficult fact, hard fact to accept. 3.5 billion people in the world today are living in an energy insecure manner. That is to say, they cannot rely on the energy that they have. By the way, that includes a number of Californians. More than 1 billion human beings, though, still live in abject energy policy. What is abject energy policy? Well, they have no other source for heating, for cooking, for reading, than the burning of biomass fuels, woods or dung. It's pretty clear that we have responsibilities to these individuals as well. It would seem that we should be committed to providing them subsistence levels of reliable, affordable energy within the context of our zero goals. In 2010, 83% of all consumed energy in the world derived from oil and gas. 2010, 83%. It's 12 years later. We have invested hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in solar, in any number of other renewables, and today, the percentage of energy that we derive from oil and gas is 80%. It went from 83% to 80%. Given that we consume more energy every day, we're also using more barrels. That 83% translated to 86 million barrels of oil a day. Today, humanity consumes 100 million barrels of oil today, all to President Putin's delight. So where's all that oil and gas coming from? Well, it's actually not coming from American and European suppliers, not much anyway. 3/4 of all oil and gas in the world is owned by state-owned enterprises, by the likes of Sinopec, Rosneft, PDVSA, Saudi Aramco. The war that we are having on our own oil and gas producers is truly senseless. What are we supposed to do? As individuals, as business leaders, as managers of Notre Dame's endowment, Mike, as Mendoza graduates, what are we supposed to do? What are our responsibilities in the context of this extraordinary challenge, which is genuinely eliminating species around the globe, clearly putting great strain on our water, great strain on any number of other communities? I believe the principles of subsidiarity and solidarity will provide answers to those questions. First of all, we must all question our carbon use, and mitigate what we can. We must all understand that billions of our brothers and sisters still need more clean, affordable, and reliable energy than they now have. We should recognize and accept that America and our allies need energy self-sufficiency. Energy independence and national security are in fact synonymous. We should also adopt an all-of-the-above approach to energy production, with preference for clean alternatives, notably nuclear. Of course we need more nuclear, wind, solar, geothermal, hydrogen, but we're also going to need oil and gas for the foreseeable future. Regarding the allocation of public resources, we need to have an adult conversation about mitigation versus adaptation. McKinsey has put a $230 trillion price tag. I have to repeat that. $230 trillion price tag on achieving net zero by 2050. Where's that money supposed to come from? Who's supposed to pay that? So the idea of mitigation versus adaptation is recognizing that in actual fact, and could you bring up the Henry Ford thing again? Sorry to do that to you. There was a little headline below the Henry Ford that I meant to point out but didn't. We have a situation that we've had now apparently since 1914, because many houses were swept into the Atlantic by storm and a crew of 32 drowned in 1914. These are not new issues. We should also recognize that we should use more investments, like green bonds, like the construction of LEED certified buildings, and like a wide range of emerging technologies with verifiable double bottom lines. I am more than ever convinced, as I've spent time in this space, that it is possible to do well and do good with our investments. So in other words, Ali, achieving optimally inclusive, sustainable growth is going to be an all-hands challenge. Business and finance cannot and will not on their own turn the carbon clock backwards. Business and finance can be no better, but they should be no worse than the communal, social, political, and consumptive forces which are shaping their opportunity sets. And with that, I'd like to ask my dear friend, Senator Phil Gramm, to say far wiser things than I have. Thank you for your time. No, let's turn your mic on. Where's your mic?
Oh, I forgot to turn my mic on. Hold on. You get old, you get slow. Let's see. You're on. Now you can hear me. Well, it's awfully tempting to jump into that environmental debate, but I'm going to resist it. First of all, Terry Keeley's book is a book you ought to read. And especially since they're going to give you a copy, take it and read it. But I want to put a finer edge on this issue than Terry has put on it. First of all, I want to read you what the fiduciary standards of American law are with regard to investing somebody else's money. And the key words there are somebody else's. The law says that money shall be invested solely in the interest of the investor. It says it should be invested for the exclusive purpose of providing benefit to the investor. So I think that in America, in addressing this issue, we need to start by enforcing the law. And the law says when you're investing somebody else's money, you invest it in their interest. Now, this has become far more important because we had an innovation where people came up with the idea of index funds, which dramatically lowered the cost for ordinary people to invest in a broad range of assets. But it had a hidden cost, as many innovations do, in that the hidden cost was governance. Because suddenly now you've got people who are in control of the voting interest of vast swaths of American corporate ownership who are voting shares that are not theirs. anytime you have anybody voting somebody else's shares or spending somebody else's money, you have a ripe situation for a problem. Now, let me say that in terms of EGS, that if it's your business, did I say it right? ESG, okay, it's okay.
It's out of order. You had it alphabetically correct.
All right, so in terms of EGS, if it's your business, all right, ESG. In terms of ESG, if it's your business, invest the money however you want to. But if it's somebody else's money, and 74% of the common stock in America are owned by pension funds, 401ks, IRAs, and are owned by insurance companies to back up annuities and life policies, then your investment should be in their interest, not promoting your objectives, but promoting their objectives. Now, what is the purpose of business? Is there a moral purpose of business? Yes. Prosperity, growth, expansion of human freedom. Terry and I worked at UBS together, and we used to do these huge transactions where people made millions of dollars. And invariably, the investment bankers would come to me and say, you know, I want to give back. And what can I do to give back? Now, they're talking about their money, so I gave them lots of advice. But I would always say to them, now, wait a minute. You act as if you didn't do anything. We just did this vast IPO that expanded the availability to capital for a company that has a powerful idea that is going to create thousands of jobs and generate an improvement in the living standards of people living on this planet, and you're talking about you want to give back? You gave at work. You gave at work. And that is important to understand. Business does not have to justify itself based on trying to do somebody's definition of good. Business does good when it works within the law and within conventional behavior and promotes profits. There is nothing ugly, dirty, obscene, or immoral about profits. They fund this university, and they fund all good works in the world. Finally, let me say on this subject, because I want to say a little bit about the environment, and I've only got a little 5 minutes left. This new idea of stakeholder capitalism is not a new idea, but an old idea. It is right out of the Dark Ages. The Enlightenment concluded intellectually and convinced the Western world that people's thoughts belonged to them, that they had the right to worship God in the way they chose, and that the sweat of their brow and their thrift and the benefits it generated belonged to them. It did not belong to the crown. It did not belong to the village. It did not belong to the guild. It belonged to them.
You left out the church.
And I didn't mention that, and it didn't belong to the church. Thank you. Now, here's the point. That unleashed a revolution in production on this planet. It changed the world because those institutions, as stakeholders, were bleeding the incentive out of working and saving. And when savings and investment and labor were unleashed to benefit the people who worked and the people who saved and the people who invested, it set free this vast productive capacity that made the world we live in. The effort to impose through ESG or anything else a duty on business or labor to promote somebody else's interest is undoing the Enlightenment and taking us back to the Dark Ages. And I think it's important that we speak out on it. Now, I want to talk about Henry Ford. What happened in 1914? World War I. Henry Ford, in giving that pay raise, got ahead of the power curve. He created a massive commitment to his company. He generated public awareness of Ford that was unparalleled in the world. And in doing so, he was promoting the interest of his shareholder. The difference between making somebody do something and having them do it is, does it in the long run benefit the shareholder? Now, we have to be very careful because every politician loves to say the problem with American business is they're focused on short-term profits and we want them to focus on long-term profits. No, they want them to focus on their interest. If businesses don't see it as good business, it's not good business. And finally, let me say that in making this decision, I think there's sort of a legal parallel, and that is, what is their intent? If they're appointing various groups to their board because they think it promotes diversity of thinking and brings in new ideas and new vision, if that's their intent, that it's good for their business, then it's in the interest of the shareholder. But if they're doing it because of social pressures, then it is not in the interest of the shareholder.
Hey, Phil.
It is not in the interest of the country.
Phil, you know what you're doing? You're silencing the church. So we can take this on a little bit later. Shall we let Father Ollie give a few words or no?
And in the long run, it's not in the interest of the church, but I don't speak for the church. I speak for American capitalism. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I want to say, don't anybody leave here saying that a priest at Notre Dame told you didn't have to make money in business. And second of all, that you didn't have to give some of it back to us at Notre Dame. I'm very honored to be here with Terrence and Senator Graham. It's an honor to be on the stage with them. And I think I would say I've known Terrence for more years than I'm going to tell. He was a student here, and we've been friends ever since. He sends me his writings, and he gets my comments. And for the most part, I think he's done wonderful work. The book, Sustainability, I commend to all of you. I think the key point in that book, which he already mentioned, is that an awful lot of companies are telling you that they are using the ESG issues in making their decisions for investment. And so a lot of people are interested in investing in companies that are proceeding on ESG issues. One of the key points that Terrence has discovered, and certainly I have as well, is that we want to have outcomes, better social and economic outcomes. They have to talk about the outcomes, not just that they're putting ESG out there so they can sell more of their investments. And I'm very aware of this because, as Monet pointed out, I've been on the board of directors of the United Nations Global Compact for 20 years. And we started the PRR, which is the Principles for Responsible Investment. And that's the group that advances these ESG issues. And I kept asking, it's wonderful that more and more companies are saying they are doing ESG, but do you have any evidence that it's working, that you've got outcomes that are advancing the social and economic issues? And some companies do. Most do not. And that's the brilliance, I think, of Terrence's research. And I think that's why I commend that book to you. And that's why I recommended that Terrence come here and speak. I'm delighted that he accepted our invitation. Now, obviously, the scholars get paid to disagree. You know, we always have to, and as my students here know, I will find something wrong with all of your papers to make you better people. And so that's what we get paid to do. And so far as I've grown, it's because people criticized me. So I have one major criticism, and that is, what is the purpose of business? What is the purpose of business? And I think it's to create sustainable value for stakeholders. And where did I get this idea? Two sources. One is the business leaders I work with at the UN Global Compact. We just had a meeting at the UN 3 weeks ago. We had 1,000 CEOs from 160 countries. We rented the Jacob Javits Center because we couldn't fit them all in the UN. And at the board meeting, at the coffee break, I said, how many people what do you think the purpose of business is? Because our rhetoric in the UN Global Compact is to create sustainable value for stakeholders. And obviously, one of the key stakeholders is the investor. If you don't create a sustainable value, you don't create return for the investor, you're not here tomorrow. So let's not kid ourselves. That's a core value. But most of the CEOs that I work with, and I'm out of my league. I mean, I'm hobnobbing with all these people. You know, I'm the only academic on the committee. I'm giving them ethical coverage, I think. But in any event, I get to talk to lots of interesting people. And the gist of what they think the purpose of business is probably summed up here from a statement by the CEO of Novartis. It's to run the company successfully and generate products which are useful to your customers, resulting in economic value creation. We also have to act responsibly, respecting not only the law, but also fulfilling legitimate expectations that society has of us. Today, these expectations, in most instances, go beyond short-term profit maximization. What people want is that business people behave in a responsible way in communities in which they live, that they treat employees fairly, respect the environment, and demonstrate sensitivity to the problems of other disadvantaged people in the world. And so that's basically what I get in working with the UN Global Compact and the CEOs. They don't think the purpose of business is simply to make money. In fact, the chairman of the board, whom I work with daily, said, if you thought that was the purpose of business, you wouldn't do very well today. You simply wouldn't do very well. Because you have to factor in the stakeholders. And now, a major source of this for me is Catholic social teaching. And as you may know, we are celebrating the 100th anniversary of the business school. Actually 2 years ago, but we had to put it off because of the pandemic. I think we're going to celebrate it in March. We hope to. And my colleague Jim Otteson is working on that with me and others. But we are very clear in the mission. This is a wonderful little statement: mission, vision, and strategic priorities of Mendoza College of Business. And one of the things we say here in the opening line, as a leading business school guided by the university's Catholic identity, the Mendoza College of Business seeks to grow the good in business to improve the human condition in an ever-changing society. And so we're guided by the Catholic identity. Then it goes on later to speak of the Catholic character. Now, the core of the Catholic character is expressed by St. Pope John Paul II in Centesimus Annus, which is an encyclical, a pastoral letter that he put out. And he said, the purpose of a business firm is not simply to make a profit, but is to be found in the very existence of a community of persons who in various ways are endeavoring to satisfy their basic needs and who form a particular group that at the service of the whole society. And that Centesimus Annus is a crucial document. Now, as you know, confining an academic to 10 minutes is punishment. This is my purgatory. But he's holding up a sign. I find many business leaders who are not Catholic have come to this. One of my favorite people in the UN is John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods. And John Mackey was in a debate with Milton Friedman. And Friedman said, we both agree. You took good care of your employees because it made you more money. And that's what I said smart business leaders do. And John Mackey said, no, I took good care of my employees because they were my friends. They weren't a means to an end. They were an end in themselves. They had a human dignity based on the fact that they're created by a God. And he said, I went to their funerals. I went to their baptisms, their mitzvahs, all the Jewish occasions. And I did that because they were my friends. And my wife and I lived over the store in Texas where we founded Whole Foods, and we had friends. And then when we expanded Whole Foods to hundreds of thousands of employees, we had to get a corporate culture which would adapt this way of treating employees as colleagues and friends, and not simply as a means to an end. So that's the crucial document, I think, of Catholic social teaching. And one other point, I think just to get you thinking about it, the purpose of business. If you ask a doctor, what's the purpose of being a doctor? He's going to tell you to heal patients. Now, the doctor has to make money. How is she going to support her family, pay the mortgage, put the kids through college? So the purpose of the profession isn't to make money, but you certainly have to make money to be there tomorrow. Ask a lawyer, what's the purpose of being a lawyer? Seek justice. You have to make money or you're not here tomorrow. At least they teach us in law school that the purpose is to seek justice. I hope that's true. I wonder sometimes. But anyway, that's for another lecture. What's the purpose of being a teacher? To educate students in their minds and hearts. And we have to get paid. Not enough, I don't think. But anyway, there's the dean there. He can settle that. But what's the purpose of being a business leader? It's to create sustainable value for stakeholders. To tell a business leader all she has to do is to make money to be a success is a tremendous failure. And I think, I hope none of you will be that way. Thank you.
Friends, at this point, we'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. We have just about 7 minutes to do so, so if you could please keep your question brief and to the point. And we'd like to prioritize students. So if there are any students in the audience, we'll go ahead and pass the mic to you first and open it to anyone else at that point.
Up front.
Hi, so this would be a
Talk
question.
right in the mic so we can hear you. No.
Yeah, can you hear me? All right, awesome. So this would be a question for Mr. Keeley, but one of the discussions we had in Professor Sikorsky's class about like Milton Friedman was kind of like, how do you determine like the social, like what society determines as ethical and what like confines you do to maximize profits within those. So how do you think like we should determine what society deems as ethical in terms of like what constraints businesses have to act within and like maximize profits within those constraints?
So I think obviously Senator Graham is right. That you can opine on that however the way you like, and we could have a nice discussion about it. But the question fundamentally would be who owns the business? There's an important part of the story of Henry Ford that I did not tell. And that was that in 1918, he was sued by the Dodge brothers because he kept on investing back into the business and not paying out to the shareholders. And what ended up happening is that court case went to the Michigan Supreme Court, and it was decided in the favor of the Dodge brothers. No, they owned the company. Henry Ford had to stop cutting his prices, and he had to pay them shares. Well, guess what Henry Ford decided? This is very inconvenient. I'm buying them out. He became the 100% owner of, this is again Twitter and Musk, right? Nobody gets to report to nobody now. So I guess my answer to your question, and you can see why I've asked Senator Phil Gramm to be a respondent. Phil's on my right, Ollie's on my left. I'm the sensible center. I look like I'm the sensible guy on the stage, so I get to cut it right down the middle.
You don't look that reasonable to me.
Pity this wasn't an Oxford debate. But I think that the question that you ask is a fair one. What would a shareholder do? And I have a blog. By the way, everyone's invited to join the Solutions Forum, which is on my website, www.1.6.com, and I'll share that with. But on the solutions forum, I have a blog entry that's called, I let BlackRock vote my shares and you should too. And the reason is, I have such confidence in the 122 members of the stewardship team at BlackRock who cast more than 160,000 votes a year. It's hard to cast those votes, Phil, you'd be busy. Just on the S&P 500, you'd be voting more than 6,000 times a year. So you have to choose. Stewardship has now become a way where you actually compete for those assets. So what I would say to you is, buy shares in companies that you want to change, work very, very carefully with the folks that you want to have change, and work through that manner. The important thing is, this is one of the fatal flaws of the ESG market, they primarily consist of buying green companies, things that are already aligned to Paris. Value is created by a brown company, value, shareholder value, by a brown company becoming more green. That's how you actually add value. What we should be doing is the exact opposite of ESG investing. We should be buying lousy companies and insisting that they improve their operations. Did I not answer your question?
No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay. But that's an important point, the Dodge brothers.
Say again?
The Dodge brothers, you're a Dodge brother.
Yeah, well, no, let's
He's
go on
Henry
to-
Ford, you're Dodge.
Let's go on to somebody else. I'm tempted to.
Hello, my name is Joe Hunt. Question for Mr. Keeley. If not 2050, what goals should the world have in terms of reducing carbon emissions?
A realistic one. A realistic one. This is multivariable calculus. We're solving for more than one variable, not just carbon. And so the idea, of course we want a cleaner world. Of course we want, but the variable that we need to solve for is not just lower carbon. We have to be mindful of the fact that energy is so essential. I mean, should we have a carbon tax? We have a carbon tax. Putin gave us a carbon tax. How does it feel? Do you like the carbon tax? Feels great, right? No, it feels horrible. This is what is causing a lot of the inflation, the carbon tax that we have. So you say specifically, what are my environmental goals? To clean up the environment, in particular, get our carbon use down as quickly as possible without punishing unnecessarily some of our growth objectives and a good number of our national security objectives. Putin is laughing. Don't you remember how he described all of the discoveries of fracking was barbaric? As soon as Vladimir Putin tells you fracking is barbaric, do more of it. Because we all know what he's doing. We are so addicted to what it is that Vladimir Putin produces. There's some blood on the hands of ESG enthusiasts for the war in the Ukraine, if you were to ask me. That's how strongly I feel about how some of the messaging of ESG has not served human interests very well. We need to get our carbon footprints down. We need to get them down as quickly as possible. We also need to understand that we're probably looking at something closer to 2.5 to 3.5 degrees Celsius rise in temperatures. It's going to happen. By Canada. Stay long Canada. There will be winners and losers. This is certainly not a human extinction event either. Do you want to pile in on climate?
No.
Well, thank you.
That probably didn't feel that good.
Here's a question.
Mr. Keeley, you talked kind of as a joke, I guess, about California being energy not as stable. Do we have more of an obligation to help our nation's people who are unstable energy-wise, or people in other third world countries who are struggling in other ways first? Or is it
doesn't need to be an
obligation?
either-or question. I wouldn't make it into an either-or question. I do think that what we're not doing in nuclear is senseless. And actually, I suspect Mike and the very smart people at NDIO are very much participating in a number of the investments that Bill Gates is leading through breakthrough energy ventures. There's a number of things that can be done to create a lot more reliability of energy locally, including smaller fusion opportunities. We're going to get energy right. I believe the United States of America has a wonderful opportunity to get energy right. And no, I don't. I think what we should be doing in Pakistan does not need to be held back by what we're doing for California. Californians need to get out of their own way, though, to some degree.
With that, folks, unfortunately, we've come to our time limit, so we do have one last remaining obligation, which is to thank all of our speakers, Mr. Keeley, Senator Graham, and Father Ollie for joining us. We will have Mr. Keeley, I believe, available to sign copies of the book if you got one on your way out. And on behalf of the Notre Dame Deloitte Center for Ethical Leadership, the Center for Ethics and Religious Values in Business, as well as Mendoza College of Business, we'd like to give them a little gift with some Mendoza swag here, and let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Get some swag. Get some swag. Thank you very much. Very kind. Thank you very much.
Is this something else? Okay, great.
I don't know. You better wear that to an Aggie
No, he
game.
gave me a T-shirt earlier today.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. I apologize if it was an assignment.